The Galactic Armada had never lost. For 10,000 years, their black ships had moved across the galaxy like a shadow falling over the stars. World after world fell to them. Species after species knelt or died. The Armada did not care which. They had no weakness. Their ships were faster than any other. Their weapons were stronger than any other. Their soldiers were bred for war and nothing else. They did not feel fear. They did not feel mercy. They did not feel pity. They did not feel anything. The Armada was not born. It was created. A long time ago, on a world that no longer existed, a group of scientists decided to build the perfect soldier. They took away fear. They took away mercy. They took away love. They took away everything that made a creature soft. What remained was hard, cold, perfect. The perfect soldier became the perfect army. The perfect army became the perfect armada. And the perfect armada conquered the galaxy. Other species tried to fight. They built weapons. They built walls. They built alliances. Nothing worked. The Armada had no weakness. You could not scare them. You could not bribe them. You could not reason with them. They simply came. They simply destroyed. They simply moved on. When the Armada discovered Earth, they expected another easy victory. Their scouts returned with reports. Humans were soft. Their bodies were fragile. Their ships were slow. Their weapons were primitive. They fought among themselves. They cried when they were hurt. They mourned when they died. They were weak. So weak. The Armada prepared to destroy humanity. It would take a week. Maybe less. The Armada sent a small fleet. 50 ships. That was all they needed. They had conquered worlds with fewer. The fleet approached Earth. The humans saw them coming. They sent messages. Who are you? What do you want? The Armada did not answer. They never answered. They just came. The human ships moved to intercept. They were slow. They were weak. They were destroyed in minutes. The Armada did not celebrate. They did not cheer. They simply moved on. The human colonies were next. Small settlements on distant moons. Easy targets. The Armada destroyed them one by one. They did not feel satisfaction. They did not feel pride. They did not feel anything. Then they reached the colony of New Haven. New Haven was a small world. 10,000 people lived there. Farmers, teachers, families, children. The Armada did not care. They targeted the colony. Their weapons charged. Their soldiers prepared. The attack began. The colony fell quickly. Buildings collapsed. Fires spread. People ran and screamed and died. The Armada watched. They did not flinch. They did not look away. They did not feel anything. But something happened on New Haven that the Armada did not expect. Something small. Something personal. Something that would change everything. A woman named Dr. Aries Thorne was on New Haven. She was a scientist. She had come to study the local geology. She was not a soldier. She was not a fighter. She was just a mother. Her daughter, Lena, was with her. Lena was 7 years old. She had brown hair and bright eyes. She liked to collect rocks and ask questions. When the attack began, Aries grabbed Lena and ran. They ran through the smoke and the fire and the screaming. They ran toward the evacuation ships. They almost made it. They were so close. Aries could see the ship. She could see the door. She could see the light. Then a piece of debris fell. A wall collapsed. Aries was thrown to the ground. She lost her grip on Lena's hand. When she looked up, her daughter was gone. The wall had fallen between them. Aries screamed. She tried to dig through the rubble. She tore her hands. She broke her nails. She screamed until her throat was raw. She found Lena under the debris. Her daughter was not moving. Her eyes were closed. Her brown hair was covered in dust. Aries pulled her out. She held her. She called her name. Lena. Lena. Wake up, baby. Please wake up. Lena did not wake up. She would never wake up again. Aries sat in the rubble, holding her daughter's body, as the Armada ships flew overhead. She did not run. She did not hide. She just sat there, and she felt something. Not fear. Not despair. Something colder. Something harder. Something the Armada had never encountered. Revenge. The Armada moved on. They did not know about Aries Thorne. They did not care. One woman. One dead child. It meant nothing to them. They had killed billions. They had destroyed thousands of worlds. One more death was nothing. But Aries Thorne was not nothing. She was a scientist. She was a mother. And she was angry. Not the hot anger of a soldier. The cold anger of a woman who had lost everything. She would not forget. She would not forgive. She would not stop. She gathered what she could from the ruins. A data pad. A scanner. A small generator. She found a working ship. A small one. A slow one. A weak one. It did not matter. She would not fight the Armada with weapons. She would fight them with something else. Something they did not have. Something they had forgotten. She would fight them with the heart. The Armada did not know it yet, but they had made a mistake. They had hurt someone the humans loved. And humans, the Armada would learn, do not forgive. They do not forget. They do not stop. They keep coming. Not with ships or weapons. With something more dangerous. With love. With memory. With grief. With rage. Ares Thorn pointed her small ship toward the edge of the galaxy. The Armada had gone that way. She would follow. She would find them. She would make them feel. She would make them remember. She would make them hurt the way she hurt. She looked at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Armada was conquering another world. Somewhere out there, another mother was losing her child. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was burning. Ares touched the data pad. On the screen was a picture of Lena. Smiling. Happy. Alive. I will make them remember you, Ares whispered. I will make them remember all of you. She engaged the engines. The small ship jumped into faster than light. The Armada had no weakness. But they were about to find one. And that weakness had a name. Her name was Ares Thorn. And she was coming. The Armada did not notice the small ship following them. Why would they? It was only one vessel. Small. Slow. Barely worth a sensor ping. Inside it was one woman. Ares Thorn. Scientist. Mother. A survivor who had already lost everything worth surviving for. The Armada had erased her world without hesitation. Without recognition. Without even slowing their advance. To them, she was nothing. And nothing could not threaten anything. So they did not look back. Ares followed anyway. From far behind their formation, she watched them burn system after system. Worlds turned quiet. Civilizations reduced to static. Entire histories erased mid-sentence. She recorded everything. Not for command. Not for allies. There were none left. She recorded it because someone had to prove it had happened. At first, she studied them like any scientist would study a phenomenon. She mapped fleet movements, tracked engagement cycles, measured reaction times. She rebuilt battles and simulations thousands of times, searching for an edge that did not exist. But the Armada was not merely advanced. It was complete. Every ship identical in doctrine. Every soldier identical in response. Every action calculated, efficient, and without hesitation. There was no error. No variation. No fear. And after months of searching, Ares reached the conclusion she refused to accept. There was nothing to exploit. She stopped sleeping. Stopped eating properly. The only constant in her life was a small image on her console. Lena, 7 years old, smiling in a moment stolen from a time before everything ended. Mommy, do stars get lonely? Ares had answered once, half laughing. No, they have each other. Now that answer felt like cruelty. One night, exhaustion finally broke through her discipline. She stared at the data until it stopped meaning anything. Then she whispered into the empty ship. I can't beat them. The words should have ended it. Instead, they created space for something else. Because the Armada had no weakness in structure. But they had one absence so absolute it became invisible even to themselves. They did not feel. No grief. No fear. No memory that carried weight. Only function. And Ares realized something that made her chest tighten. Absence is not immunity. It is just unfilled space. And space can be occupied. The idea did not come as inspiration. It came as grief sharpening into direction. What if you did not destroy the Armada? What if you returned them to themselves? She began building the device. No weapons. No explosives. No kinetic systems. Only a signal emitter. Something that could slip past everything they had built because it did not behave like an attack. It behaved like information. Like memory. She worked from scrap components, salvaged arrays, broken civilian transmitters. Piece by piece, she constructed a broadcast system capable of crossing every shield layer the Armada relied on. But the true payload was not hardware. It was memory. She recorded Lena first. Every fragment she still had. Laughter echoing in small rooms. Questions asked without fear. Hands wrapped around hers like trust had never been optional. Then she expanded it. She went through refugee channels, silent colonies, survivor vessels drifting in the aftermath zones. She asked one thing only. Tell me what you remember before it ended. They answered. Not carefully, not formally, but honestly, because grief, once shared, stops belonging to a single person. She layered it all together. Love, lust, warmth, fear. The sound of lives that had once been ordinary before they became history. It was not organized. It was not clean. It was human. When it was finished, the device fit in her palm. It looked harmless. That was the most dangerous part. She mounted it into her ship's transmitter. Ahead, the Armada fleet filled her scope. Thousands of ships. Perfect formation. Perfect silence. Perfect absence of anything she could recognize as living. Ares hesitated. Not from fear of death. From certainty of consequence. Because she understood what she was about to do. If it worked, the Armada would no longer be what it was. If it failed, she would simply die unseen. Either way, there would be no undoing it. She looked at Lena's image one last time. I don't know if this is right, she whispered. Then softer. But I know I can't leave it like this. She activated the signal. It did not travel like a weapon. It unfolded like a thought entering a sleeping mind. It slipped through encryption, through shielding, through command structure, through everything designed to keep outside influence from reaching inside. And it arrived. Across the Armada fleet, systems did not fail. At first, nothing appeared to happen at all. Then a soldier paused mid-action. Not because of an order, because something unfamiliar had surfaced inside him. A memory, a voice, a hand that once held his when he was small enough to believe the universe was safe. His weapon lowered. On another ship, a pilot stopped correcting course. She saw a small creature sleeping against her chest. Warm, alive, trusted. And suddenly the cockpit felt too small for everything she had forgotten. She began to shake. On the flagship, a commander froze completely. Not from confusion. From recognition. He remembered the last time he had felt anything at all before training stripped it away. And the cost of everything he had done after that moment. The Armada did not scream. It did not resist. Because there was nothing built to resist returning to something it had erased from itself. Ships drifted out of formation. Weapons powered down as hands released control. Entire fleets went silent, not from defeat, but from internal collapse of purpose. The machine did not break. It dissolved. Ares watched it unfold across her screens. She had expected fire, or retaliation, or nothing. Instead, she saw stillness spreading through something that had never been still before. Her hands trembled on the console, because she realized too late what she had actually done. She had not destroyed an enemy. She had restored something that no longer knew how to survive being whole. A transmission came through open channels. Not tactical, not coordinated, just broken. Why does it hurt? Ares closed her eyes. Because she knew the answer. It hurt because it meant they had been real all along. She leaned back slowly. The Armada ships drifted in silence across the stars. Not dead, just remembering. And memory, once returned, does not leave quietly. The Armada had been built on one unshakable belief. Emotion was failure. Not a flaw in judgment. Not a distraction. A defect that must be removed. So they removed it, piece by piece, until their soldiers became perfect instruments of war, efficient, obedient, and utterly empty. But Dr. Ares Thorne had learned something different in the ruins of 1,000 burned worlds. Nothing human is ever truly removed. Only buried. And buried things, wait. Her ship drifted at the edge of the Armada fleet like a ghost. One small vessel. One grieving scientist. One mother with nothing left but purpose. Inside, the device hummed softly. She called it the Heartbreaker, not because she wanted to destroy them, but because she already knew what it would cost. The signal she had built was not energy. Not code. Not weaponized logic. It was memory. Raw, unfiltered, human memory stitched together from billions of stolen lives. A father lifting his child onto his shoulders. A mother singing through tears during a blackout. A boy laughing with no reason except being alive. A daughter calling out, "I'm home," to an empty house that still remembered her voice. Ares had taken all of it, and packed it into a signal that could not be defended against. Because you cannot shield against being human. The Armada fleet filled the void of space like a moving cathedral of steel. Silent. Perfect. Unified. Then the Heartbreaker activated. At first, nothing happened. The ships continued forward. The fleets held formation. The commanders issued silent calculations. Ares almost believed she had failed. Then the first fracture appeared. A pilot froze mid-command. Not because of error. Because he remembered something he was never supposed to remember. A warm kitchen. A voice calling his name. A hand ruffling his hair. "Come eat before it gets cold." His mother. A word the Armada had erased from his neural lattice 50 years ago. He screamed. Not in pain. In recognition. Across the fleet, the signal spread like dawn breaking through a dead sky. One soldier dropped his weapon. Another fell to his knees. Another simply whispered, "No, no, I remember." And then the Armada broke. Not explosively. Not violently. But completely. Because perfection cannot survive truth. Memories flooded every neural interface simultaneously. Millions of soldiers suddenly saw lives they had been stripped of. Childhoods. Names. Laughter. Lust. Love. Everything they had been trained to forget returned all at once. And the human mind, no matter how altered, was never designed to hold that much truth at once. Command ships lost cohesion. Weapons systems shut down mid-targeting. Entire battle groups drifted in silence as officers wept openly, unable to distinguish between past and present. A general named Valen collapsed in his command throne. His voice cracked as he whispered a name no one had spoken in centuries. Lyra. His daughter. He had killed her in training simulations designed to remove weakness. He remembered now. And memory is heavier than any armor. On a distant destroyer, a soldier named Kale abandoned his post and simply sat by a viewport, watching stars blur through tears he could not stop. "I used to want to be a gardener," he whispered. "I forgot why." On another ship, entire security divisions turned off their own power cores to escape the flood of remembered lives. The Armada was not dying. It was waking up. And it did not know how to survive itself. Ares watched from her small vessel as the impossible unfolded. She had expected collapse, resistance, even retaliation. She had not expected grief to be more powerful than war. Her hands trembled on the console. "This is what you did," she whispered to Lena's photograph. "You made me remember, so I made them remember too." Her daughter smiled back, frozen in time. And Ares understood something she had avoided for years. Memory was not justice. It was burden. The Armada fleet began to scatter, not in strategy, but in instinct. Some ships fled toward unknown space. Others powered down entirely. A few attempted to continue fighting, but their crews refused orders. There was nothing left to obey. Only remembering. The invincible machine had become millions of broken lives trying to breathe again. And in that chaos, something new began. A transmission. Not from a weapon. From a surviving Armada commander who had not shut down her systems. Her voice was shaking. "This is Commander Seilvar. I do not know who I am anymore." A pause. "I remember my sister. I remember her singing. I remember. I was supposed to protect her." Silence. Then. "We are not an Armada. We are people." The words spread faster than any command code ever had. Ships began broadcasting identities instead of orders. Names instead of coordinates. Memories instead of targets. The war fleet dissolved into voices. Into stories. Into grief. And finally, into silence. Not empty silence. Living silence. Ares shut down the heartbreaker. Not because it was finished. But because it was too much. She leaned back in her chair, exhausted beyond thought, and held Lena's picture to her chest. "I did it," she whispered. "I broke them." A pause. Then softer. "But I broke myself too." Outside her viewport, the Armada was no longer an Armada. It was drifting lights. Silent ships. Awakened souls learning how to exist without war for the first time in 10,000 years. There would be no victory celebration. No conquest. No surrender ceremony. Only aftermath. Only rebuilding. Only the terrifying question of what comes after remembering everything you lost. Ares looked at the stars. Somewhere out there, billions of broken soldiers were remembering how to be alive. And she wondered if forgiveness was even possible in a universe where memory could be a weapon. But one truth remained, steady and undeniable. They had all been broken by war. And all been healed, by remembering they were never meant to be machines. Only human. Even if it took a mother's grief to remind the galaxy. The heartbreaker broadcast for 3 days without pause. It did not need to be repeated. It did not need to escalate. Once was enough. Because memory, once awakened, does not ask permission to exist. It simply returns. Across the Armada fleet, silence turned into noise. Noise turned into collapse. And collapse turned into truth. Ships that had once moved like a single organism now drifted apart, blind and uncoordinated. Entire battle formations dissolved as pilots stopped responding to commands that no longer made sense to them. Weapons systems powered down mid-lock, not from failure, but refusal. Soldiers were no longer soldiers. They were people. And people remember. A young pilot named Vera stared at her hands as they shook uncontrollably. She had flown hundreds of missions without hesitation. She had never once questioned an order. Now she could not remember how she had ever forgotten her own name. It came back to her slowly. Not like a file opening. Like a wound reopening. Home. A small house near a river. Her brother throwing stones into water just to watch ripples spread. "Race you to the bridge," he had shouted once, laughing. She had won. She had left him behind. Now she screamed, not because she was hurt, but because she remembered the moment she stopped being someone who could feel hurt at all. Elsewhere, a commander named Haltor shut down every tactical display in his chamber. The screens went dark. The war plans disappeared. In their place came something he had not seen in centuries. A child's drawing. Himself. Stick figure. Big smile. A sun in the corner. On the back of the drawing, in faded ink. "Come home soon." He had never come home. He pressed both hands against his face and broke. Not strategically. Not politically. Completely. The Armada did not fall like an empire collapsing under attack. It unraveled like a dream ending too suddenly to understand. And in the center of it all, Dr. Aries Thorne watched from her small ship. 3 days without sleep had hollowed her into something quieter than exhaustion. She had expected victory to feel like fire. Instead, it felt like absence. The heartbreaker was still transmitting, but weaker now. Not because it was failing, but because there was less resistance left to break. She should have felt relief. She did not, because the sound she now heard across open channels was not surrender. It was grief. She opened a galaxy-wide transmission. Her voice was steady only because it had nothing left to shake. "This is Dr. Aries Thorne." She paused, listening to the distant echo of thousands of ships crying at once. "The Armada has ceased combat operations. Not through destruction. Not through defeat." Another pause. "Through remembering." She leaned closer to the console, eyes unfocused. "You were not monsters," she said quietly. "That was the lie you were built on. You were people who were taught to forget being people." A breath. "And now you remember everything at once." The transmission carried her words across broken fleets and silent war zones. Across systems that had burned for centuries. Across soldiers who no longer knew how to hold weapons without trembling. "You will say this is punishment," she continued. "You will say this is justice." Her voice lowered. "But memory is not justice. It is truth. And truth does not care what survives it." She ended the broadcast. No celebration followed. No cheering fleets. Only silence spreading through the galaxy like a slow dawn. On the flagship of the former Armada, General Vaughn, no longer a general in anything but habit, stood alone in a dim corridor. Emergency lighting flickered overhead. Systems had been abandoned mid-function. The ship was still alive, but barely. He had not given an order in hours. He had not needed to. Everyone was remembering too loudly to listen. He walked to a viewport. The stars outside did not look like targets anymore. They looked like questions. Behind him, a younger officer spoke softly. "Sir, what do we do now?" Vaughn hesitated. For the first time in his life, rank meant nothing. Strategy meant nothing. Victory meant nothing. Only memory remained. He answered carefully, as if speaking might break the universe further. "We go home." A pause. "And we try to remember how to be there." The officer did not salute. He simply nodded, tears already forming, and walked away. Across the Armada, ships turned slowly, not in formation, but in confusion. Some headed toward known home systems. Others drifted toward unknown space, unsure if home still existed. A few simply shut down engines and floated, choosing stillness over uncertainty. No one fired. No one resisted. Because there was nothing left worth fighting against except the weight of everything they had done. And no weapon was designed for that kind of enemy. Ares watched it all. The collapse of an empire that had believed itself eternal. The return of millions of stolen lives into the minds that had carried them unknowingly. The breaking of something that was never truly steel, only carefully suppressed humanity. She should have felt like a victor. Instead, she felt like a witness to something irreversible. Her hand tightened around Lena's photograph. I did it, she whispered. But the words did not sound like triumph. They sounded like loss continuing in a different shape. Somewhere in the distance, Armada ships began broadcasting individual names instead of military codes. Not commands. Not reports. Names. The galaxy was learning its first post-war language. Not peace. Not war. Remembrance. And in that fragile, trembling silence between what they had been and what they might become, Dr. Aries Thorne finally understood the cost of what she had built. She had not destroyed an army. She had returned 1,000,000 forgotten lives to themselves. And now they would have to live with it. All of it. The heartbreaker faded into standby. Not because its work was done, but because there was nothing left that could be broken without breaking everything else. Aries set her ship on a slow course through the quieting stars. Not toward victory. Not toward revenge. Toward something far more uncertain. Aftermath. And the galaxy, for the first time in 10,000 years, did not move as one machine of war. It breathed. Unevenly. Painfully. Humanly. The war ended without ceremony. No final battle. No last stand. No explosion that marked the turning of history. Only silence. And in that silence, something far heavier than victory settled across the galaxy. Grief. It began in the Armada fleets. Soldiers who had once been engineered into obedience simply stopped. Not from command. Not from strategy. But from remembering. They remembered mothers they had been taught to erase. Fathers they had been conditioned to forget. Homes reduced to ash by their own hands. Names they had not spoken in centuries. And once memory returned, war became impossible. Ships drifted out of formation like broken thoughts. Weapons systems powered down mid-targeting. Entire battle groups went dark, not destroyed, but abandoned by the will to continue. The Armada did not surrender. It unraveled. Some returned home. Those were the fortunate ones. They arrived to find light still burning in windows they thought long extinguished. Families that had refused to stop waiting. Children who had grown into adults on stories of someone who might still return. There were tears. There was forgiveness. There was silence held together by trembling hands. And there was healing, slow, imperfect, real. Others returned to nothing. Only rubble. Only dust. Only names carved into memorial stone by worlds that no longer existed. Those soldiers did not cry. There was nothing left in them that could. They simply sat among the ruins of what they had erased and learned, too late, what they had been. Not monsters. Not machines. Just people who had been told to forget they were people. The Armada itself was dismantled piece by piece. Warships decommissioned. Weapons melted down. Training facilities shut forever. The systems that had once removed emotion were destroyed, not in anger, but in exhaustion. The galaxy had seen enough of what happens when feeling is engineered away. Even the scientists who built the system were judged differently than expected. Some were punished. Some were exiled. Some were forgiven. Most simply vanished into obscurity, unwanted by both vengeance and mercy. The galaxy was too tired for hatred to survive. And into that exhausted peace stepped Dr. Aries Thorne. Her name spread faster than any fleet once had. The woman who broke the Armada. The mother who turned memory into collapse. The scientist who made grief into a force stronger than war. The galaxy wanted a symbol. A savior. A monument. She refused all of it. She stood before the Galactic Council one final time. Her presence was quiet. Not commanding. Not triumphant. Just human. I did not end a war, she said. I restored memory. Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. They were not defeated. They were returned to themselves. A pause. And that return hurt. She looked across the council, across species once divided by centuries of conflict, now sitting in uneasy stillness. I am not your hero, she said. I am not your weapon. I am a mother who refused to let her child be forgotten. Her hands tightened slightly. My daughter was Lena. She was 7. She liked collecting rocks because she said they were quiet pieces of the universe. Silence deepened. She is gone, and I cannot bring her back. Her gaze lowered. But I can make sure she is not erased. She stepped away from the podium. No applause followed. None was needed. The galaxy built a memorial on New Haven, the world where everything had broken. It was simple. A mother. A child. Stone, shaped not into triumph, but into memory. The mother knelt. The child rested in her arms. Not alive. Not gone. Remembered. Inscribed below it were only a few words. The war ended when the galaxy remembered it had hearts. And beneath that, for Lena, and for all the names that were never spoken again. Species came, not as conquerors or diplomats, but as survivors. Voth stood beside Kryll, Xanan beside Xylos, humans beside everyone. They did not speak much. They did not need to. They shared silence instead, a language older than war. And in that silence, healing began, not as peace imposed, but peace remembered. Former Armada soldiers came too, not as an army, not as a threat, but as broken lives trying to understand what they had been part of. They knelt before the memorial. Some apologized to no one in particular. Some whispered names they had rediscovered. Some simply wept until there was nothing left in them to weep. One former general stayed the longest. He had once been called Vaughn. Now he was David again. He had found his family. They had waited for him. He had been forgiven. But forgiveness did not erase memory. I do not know how to live with what I did, he whispered to the stone. But I will try. And for the first time in centuries, trying was enough. Ares returned once. Only once. She stood before the statue long after the crowds had gone. No speeches. No audience. Only the wind. Only memory. She reached out and touched the stone. It was cold. Unmoving. Unforgiving. Just like time. I kept my promise, Lena, she said softly. They remember now. Her voice cracked, not in grief, but in release. And so do I. She stepped back, looked once more, then turned away. She did not look back again. Because some things are not meant to be revisited. Only carried. The galaxy moved forward after that, not healed completely, not perfectly, but differently. Weapons were no longer the center of civilization. Stories were. Gardens replaced fortresses. Songs replaced orders. Names replaced numbers. And somewhere in that fragile transformation, a truth settled into collective memory. The Armada had not been destroyed. It had been remembered into ending. And the force that did it was not firepower, not strategy, not hatred. It was love, uncontained, unarmored, unforgotten. The kind that survives everything, even war.